Hello and welcome to GED Live at PALS for another GED Science practice test. This is our test 3 here on our YouTube channel, and today we will go over part 1 of this GED Science practice test. So if you find these videos helpful, please consider subscribing to our channel. Hit the bell if you don't want to miss content. A subscription definitely helps us to reach more people that are preparing for their GED tests, and yeah, I hope I can help as many people with these videos to pass their exams and earn their GED credentials. So please help us with that by subscribing to our channel. Let's get started. The first question we are looking at is this. Scientists hypothesize that increased human activities in an area results in increased nutrient loads, causing an increased frequency and severity of algal blooms in that area. Which hypothesis would be better for the researchers to use? A. If human activity increases in an area, less severe algal blooms will be expected. B. If the population increases in a certain area, higher frequency of algal blooms will be expected. If the population increases in a certain area, the more nutrients will be available for algae to grow. If the population increases in a certain area, then a larger area will be covered by the algal blooms. Okay, so let's have a quick look at the text on top again. What does the hypothesis of the scientists say? It says, okay, human activities increases in a certain area. That will result in increased nutrient loads, and these increased nutrient load then cause an increased frequency and severity of algal blooms. So we have a chain of things that are happening here, and we can leave one of these factors out in our hypothesis, because in this case A, our human activity, leads to B, which is the increased nutrient loads, which leads to C, which is the increased frequency of algal blooms. So in the end we can take a shortcut here and say A leads to C instead of going from A leads to B leads to C, and that's the refined hypothesis, which would be better in this case. And the direct link between A and C, human activity and algal blooms, is answer, let me see. Yes, answer B. If the population increases in a certain area, higher frequency of algal blooms will be expected. Now, so that directly links our first point to the last point, and it skips the increased nutrient loads. Yeah, so answer B here is definitely the refined hypothesis. Question 2 is based on the following information. Students are researching families with one brown-haired parent and one red-haired parent to understand how recessive hair color alleles interact with dominant alleles. They studied the offspring of a heterozygous brown-haired man, big B, small b, and a homozygous recessive red-haired woman, small b. Of their 4 children, 3 have brown hair and 1 has red hair. So in the exam, we could do a Punnett square in this case, where we would cross the two, and the outcome would be basically we have that big B going with this small b, or this small b, or this small b going with this small b and this small b. So the outcome would be twice this genotype and twice this genotype. These are the 4 possible combinations, and that means that we have, if the couple has another child, what is the probability that this child will have brown hair? The number of children doesn't matter. They can have 100 children. For each and every child, the probability is going to be the same. Even if they have 99 brown-haired children in a row, the 100th child still has a 50-50 chance of having brown or red hair. So again, one more time, how do we get to 50%? In the gametes, these alleles, these chromosomes where these genes are on, they will split up. The big B will go into one sperm cell, the small b will go into another sperm cell, same for the small b's in the woman. And this big B in a sperm cell can meet an egg cell with a small b, or it can meet the other one. So we have big B, small b, big B, small b, or the small b meets this small b, or that small b, small b, small b, small b, small b. 50% this genotype. Question 3. Place a circle on the diagram below to indicate the two forces that must be balanced in order for the airplane to maintain at a constant altitude, at a constant height. So for the aircraft not to go further up or down, the lift and the gravity force need to be balanced. So the two forces, we circle lift and we circle gravity in this question. Fahrenheit is a thermodynamic temperature scale where the freezing point of water is 32 degrees Fahrenheit and the boiling point is 212 degrees Fahrenheit at standard atmospheric pressure. Celsius, also called centigrade temperature scale, is a scale based on 0 degree for the freezing point and at 100 degrees Celsius for the boiling point of water. In order to convert Fahrenheit to Celsius, the following formula can be used. So degrees Celsius is equal to the temperature in Fahrenheit minus 32. So we do that first because it's in brackets, and then times 5/9. So a measure of 70 Fahrenheit is equal to which of the following in Celsius? You may use a calculator. So get your calculators out and try to find the answer. You can pause the video here and resume in a moment. I will tell you the answer now. The correct answer is B, 21.1 degrees Celsius. So even if you don't have a calculator, the calculation is not too difficult here. We put the 70 degree Fahrenheit in. 70 minus 32 is 38. And times 5/9, so 38 times 5 is basically, if we times it by 10, we get 380, and half of that is 190. And 190 divided by 9, 180 divided by 9 is 20. We're left with 10. 10 divided by 9 is 1 point something, and we have here 21.1. That's the only answer that makes sense here. All right, question 5 and 6 are based on the following information and diagram. Varicella is a virus that causes the disease chickenpox. Medications are used to treat the symptoms of fever and discomfort associated with chickenpox. In 1995, a vaccinella vaccine was made available to people in the United States. The graph shows the number of chickenpox cases reported in 4 US states from 1991 to 2007. Let's have a look at the graph. First, we see the graph. We see the years on the x-axis, 91 to 2007. And on the left-hand side, we see the number of reported cases in thousands. All right, and we can see that the graph is relatively stable around 91 to 94, and then it starts to drop until it stabilizes again at a much lower value of 15,000 from 2003, 2002 to 2007. Which conclusion is supported by the data in the graph? The vaccinella vaccine relieves chickenpox symptoms. The vaccinella vaccine is effective in treating chickenpox. The vaccinella vaccine is effective in preventing chickenpox. The vaccinella vaccine has eliminated chickenpox from the United States. So this is a bit of a vocabulary question. Relieves, treating, and preventing. So relieving symptoms means you still get sick, but you take some medicine that makes you feel better while you're sick. That means symptoms are relieved. Taking paracetamol when you have a fever, or some muscle pains, for example, that relieves the symptoms. So you don't feel so bad, but you're still sick. Treating is very similar to medicine that relieves the symptoms, but more treatment would be something like taking antibiotics for a bacterial infection. So you are sick and the treatment kills the disease so that you're getting better faster. Preventing means you don't even get sick because you have received a certain medication that protects your body from getting the disease. And we can see that the graph shows the number of reported cases. So A and B wouldn't change the number in the end. So you can only have a relief of symptoms, or you can only treat symptoms if you are sick with the disease. Prevention means you will not get the disease. So the only answer that makes really sense here is C. D we can exclude immediately because eliminated would mean that the graph would go all the way down to 0. It does not do that. So we can definitely exclude answer D. So the only thing that makes really sense here is answer C. And yeah, that's what vaccines do. Vaccines simulate an infection in our body, which allows our body to build an immunity against the disease so that we will not get the actual disease when the real pathogen is trying to attack us and infect us. So vaccines are effective in preventing a disease, in this case, chickenpox. How many cases of chickenpox were reported in 1996 in the 4 US states? 60, 600, 6,000, 60,000. 1996 is this line here. Let's go up. We are at this point. Let's go over 60. 60 what? Let's look at the y-axis. 1,000. So the correct answer here is D, 60,000. Now this question basically asks us, are we able to correctly read the graph and the axis and label of the axis? All right, here we have a little bit of a longer passage to read. Again, you can pause the video if you want to read the text yourself. Maybe that's easier for you to understand and digest it. Otherwise, I will start reading the text now. The woolly mammoth, an extinct species related to the elephant, last walked on mainland North America thousands of years ago. The precise timing and cause of this extinction are a matter of scientific debate and form the basis of two competing hypotheses. One group of scientists argues that humans are responsible for the woolly mammoth extinction. Humans first arrived in North America from Asia during the last glacial retreat. As temperatures rose, ice melted, and for a window of time roughly 12,000 to 15,000 years ago, a land bridge connected Asia and North America. During this time, humans first populated North America. Soon after the arrival of humans, these scientists argue mammoths, along with other megafauna, which are large animals, were killed off in a mass extinction. They believe the sudden arrival of humans with their efficient hunting practices overwhelmed these animals and resulted in their disappearance. Through carbon-14 dating, a direct dating method used on previously living material, the last known woolly mammoth lived between 13,000 and 15,000 years ago. The temporal correlation, the similarity in time, of these two events, the arrival of the humans and the extinction of the mammoth, forms the main line of support for this hypothesis. Evidence of kill sites, places where thousands of animals were corralled and killed in prehistoric times, adds support to this argument. Third paragraph. A different group of scientists believe that the shifting climate caused this extinction, not overhunting by humans. Between 10,000 and 15,000 years ago, the worldwide average temperature increased 6 degrees Celsius. The resulting change in climate would have led to extensive habitat loss for megafauna, again, large animals. These scientists argue that woolly mammoths survived much longer and died out thousands of years after the arrival of humans. These scientists have found traces of ancient mammoth DNA in permanently frozen soil layers in present-day Alaska. These layers date to 10,500 years ago. Which piece of evidence from the passage supports the theory that humans may not have been responsible for the extinction of the woolly mammoth? Discovery of sites of mass mammoth kills, a land bridge that connected Asia to North America, discovery of traces of ancient mammoth DNA in Alaska dating to 10,500 years ago, carbon dating that indicates the mammoths died between 13,000 and 15,000 years ago. So if a question like this comes up in the GED test, what I would recommend you to do, because it's quite long text here with a lot of information in it, so definitely use, I think you have a highlighter available on the computer-based test, so you can highlight some parts of the text that you think are important. Plus, on the notepad that you get, the erasable notepad, maybe take some notes, basically maybe summarize these long paragraphs with very few words what they are talking about, like the key idea, the main idea of the paragraph. I'm sure you've learned about that in RLA or other subjects. So I would recommend the same thing for science. Take these long paragraphs and really break them down to the key idea, to the core, and that knowing that will help you a lot with answering questions related to such long texts in the science exam. So again, and we don't have any visual hints here as well, any visual clues. There's no graph, there's no tables. It's purely text-based, can be quite difficult, a scientific text like that. So try to break it down to help you answer the question. So we can have a quick look at that. The first paragraph is like a small introduction. It tells us about the mammoth, that it's a prehistoric species and it's extinct by now. And the most important point is in the last sentence here, that even nowadays there's still a scientific debate going on, like what caused the extinction of the woolly mammoth, and there are two competing hypotheses. And then obviously the two paragraphs are about these two competing hypotheses, where the first paragraph introduces the first hypothesis and presents some arguments that support this hypothesis. The first hypothesis is humans are responsible for the extinction of the woolly mammoth. Evidence that supports this is that the last traces, no, not traces, what do they say here? One moment. The last known woolly mammoth lived between 13,000 and 15,000 years ago. So the evidence for support for this hypothesis is that the mammoths went extinct around about the same time as the humans arrived or the first humans arrived in North America. Even more support for this hypothesis is that there were kill sites discovered where thousands of animals were corralled and killed in these prehistoric times. So this is basically support for the argument that humans hunted and killed mammoths, and obviously quite a lot of them, if there are these kill sites where thousands of animals were killed. The second group of researchers argues in a different way. The second group of researchers says that a shifting climate caused the extinction of the mammoth. Their evidence is that in these 10,000 to 15,000 years ago, the climate changed drastically by an average of 6 degrees Celsius, and that change in climate would have changed the environment quite a lot, and that would have caused habitat loss for the mammoths, for the megafauna. So climate change, habitat loss leading to extinction. That is our second line of argument. And what supports this is, for sure, the evidence that these scientists have gathered for this change in climate, plus that traces of mammoth DNA were found that dated back to way later, 10,000 years ago, which is a very, very long time after the humans have arrived. And that is basically a little bit of a counter evidence for the first hypothesis. So question 7, which piece of evidence from the passage supports the theory that humans may not have been responsible for the extinction of the woolly mammoth? And you can think about the answer yourself quickly. Pause the video if you want to. The correct answer in this case is answer C, the discovery of traces of ancient mammoth DNA in Alaska dating back to 10,500 years ago. This is the correct answer because it just counters the argument that mammoths died at the same, or went extinct around about the same time as humans arrived. And this basically refutes this argument and shows, looks like mammoths were alive much longer, 2,000 to 3,000 years after humans arrived, or 5,000 to 3,000 years after humans arrived. So the humans were not responsible for their extinction. And then the others, they don't really make sense. Discovery of sites of mass killings that would support the argument for humans being responsible for the extinction, but we are looking for an argument that supports the opposite. A land bridge that connected Asia and North America, same thing. That means that humans were able to get into North America. That would support the first hypothesis as well. And same as answer D, carbon dating that indicates the mammoth died between 13,000 and 15,000 years ago. That would be an argument for that first hypothesis as well. So A, B, and D support that humans were responsible for the extinction. We are looking for an argument that does not support, that refutes this hypothesis, and the only thing that matches is C in this case. Question 8, another question that relates to this long text here. Research has shown that woolly mammoth populations decreased in a given area as the ecology of the area developed into extensive forests of birch and conifers. This type of vegetation was not favorable for the mammoth and was difficult to digest. Which position regarding mammoth extinction does this evidence support? So before we look at the answers, we basically get an extra paragraph here, and it is really important to understand where we can put this paragraph in our text here. What does it relate to? Maybe you can think about this for a moment. You can pause the video. What does this extra paragraph that we get here, to which other paragraph does this paragraph relate to? So this paragraph relates to the third paragraph. We are talking in the third paragraph about worldwide temperature increase of 6 degrees Celsius, resulting climate change would have led to extensive habitat loss. And here they basically describe a little bit more about this change in ecology, and that in the end led to the loss of the habitat, or the change of environment leading to the loss of habitat. What changes were there? Because of the change in climate, the ecology changed into other forests of birch and conifers, and what we are told here now is that this type of vegetation, this type of food for mammoths was not favorable and difficult to digest. So mammoths, as it looks like, went into a food problem, finding sufficient food. Mammoths are huge, they need a lot of food, and they need to be able to digest their food very well to get the right amount of energy out of it. If that's not the case, then an animal like this would probably just starve, basically. So which position regarding mammoth extinction does this evidence support? Basically just answered that by putting the paragraph in the right place. The mammoth became extinct because of overhunting. The mammoth became extinct because of habitat destruction by humans. The mammoth became extinct because the climate changed and its habitat was lost. The mammoth became extinct because mammoth physiology changed with the climate. So we can definitely exclude A and B because A and B relate to the first paragraph. Now what about C and D? We can exclude D. Because D would mean that the mammoth would have been able to adapt and survive in the end. If the mammoth would have been able to change its physiology to adapt to the changes in climate, then it might have not gone extinct. So this is a bit of a contradiction in the answer itself. So the only thing that makes really sense here is C. The mammoth became extinct because the climate changed and its habitat was lost. All right, question 9 and 10 are related to the following information and graph. Carbon-14 is a radioactive isotope of carbon that decays at a known rate. Plants take in both carbon-14 and carbon-12 for use in photosynthesis. However, when the plant dies, it can no longer take in carbon, and over time the radioactive carbon-14 decays, while the carbon-12 remains. This process results in the ratio of carbon-14 to carbon-12 decreasing. By measuring the amounts of carbon-12 and carbon-14 in a sample, it is possible to determine the age of the sample. The age of the sample is inversely related to the amount of carbon-14 present in the sample. Since some tree species live for thousands of years, it is possible to count annual rings to determine the accuracy of radiocarbon dating by measuring samples removed from a particular ring in a tree. In the graph, the dots represent the comparison of one sample measured with both carbon-14 and tree ring dating. The line represents a perfect match between the two measurements. That's a quite tricky bit here to read and understand. So in a nutshell, carbon-14 dating was actually referred to in the last text that we just read about the mammoth. That was used to actually tell when the mammoth went extinct. So how does it work? You take a sample from a dead organism, from a fossil or something like this that still contains some carbon, and you can look at the amount of carbon-14 atoms basically present relative compared to the amount of carbon-12. And that will change over time. The older the sample is, the more carbon-14 will break down into another element called nitrogen. So the carbon-14 basically decreases over time. And we know the rate at which carbon-14 decays, at which how fast it decreases, and by knowing that we can tell the age, the exact age of a sample, of an old sample, many thousands of years old. Now, Anyway, maybe we want to know how accurate this method actually is, like how many thousands of years or how far back into the past can we use this method. And scientists had the idea to double check with tree rings, because we know that we can count tree rings, and from that know how old a tree is. And some trees get really old, like several thousand years old. So we can take one of the really old tree rings, take a sample, check how much carbon-14 is there relative to carbon-12, use our carbon-14 dating method, and make a prediction. Okay, it's going to be this old, and then we can count the tree rings and we can check our answer. Now the graph on the left side, shows what we would expect if the carbon-14 method works perfectly. The dots should be on the red line. We can see that the dots are first on the red line, and then with increasing tree ring age, the dots get a little bit off. So let's read the question. While the two age measurements agree for more recent dates, they often do not agree for samples dating back more than 3,000 years. Scientists attribute most of this deviation to changes in carbon-14 production caused by changes in Earth's magnetic field. Which statement correctly analyzes the observed deviation? Deviation means the change from what we would expect. Radiometric carbon-14 ages are too low, implying that less carbon-14 was present in the atmosphere. Radiometric carbon-14 ages are too high. So let's first check if radiometric carbon-14 ages are too low or too high. How do we do that? Okay. Again, the red line basically shows a perfect match. If we are 5,200 years in tree rings, then the red line is 5,200 years in carbon-14. But we can see that this is not the case. That, for example, if we are on 6,800, we are around here. And that results in an age of around 5,800 on carbon-14 dating. So that means that the radiometric carbon-14 dating gives us an age that is too low. So we can exclude B and D. Radiometric carbon-14 ages are too low, yes. So here we have the tree ring age, 6,800, and the radiometric carbon-14 is 5,800. So we can exclude B and D. So it's either C or A. What does this imply when it's too low? That less carbon-14 was present, or that more carbon-14 was present? So again, what happens over time with carbon-14? Over time, carbon-14 decays. That means it breaks down, which means the less or the lower the amount of carbon-14, the older is the sample that we are looking at. In our case, the age is too young than it really is, which means carbon-14 is too high. More carbon-14 causes our sample to look younger than it really is, which means in the past there was more carbon-14 in the atmosphere than there is nowadays, leading to this deviation away from the red line. It doesn't mean there was more carbon, it just means there was more carbon-14, which is an isotope of carbon. So the correct answer here is C. Radiometric carbon-14 ages are too low, implying that more carbon-14 was present. Question 10. Which of the following statements describes the relation of tree ring age and radiometric carbon-14 age best? With increasing tree ring age, radiometric carbon-14 age decreases linearly. With increasing tree ring age, radiometric carbon-14 age increases linearly. And same bit, but decreases exponentially, increases exponentially. So exponential increase would look like this curve, first low and then rapid increase. Exponential decrease, we would go the other way, curve starting up here and then going down. Linear decrease means we start up here, going down. Linear increase means we start down here and go up. And we can see, although the dots don't match perfectly the line, they match quite well. So we have definitely a linear increase. So the correct answer is B. Tree ring age increases, radiometric carbon-14 age increases linearly. Question 11 relates to the text below. A set of parameters, a set of parents wants to determine the likelihood of the eye color of their offspring. The parents know that their genes for eye color each have two alleles. The alleles are represented by letters in the form of the genotype. One parent has a genotype of big B small b with brown eyes, and the other parent has a genotype of small b with blue eye color. Their offspring will inherit one allele from each parent. What are the possible genotypes of their offspring? Okay, we basically had that question already before. We have the same genotypes here as we had before. Again, you can construct a Punnett square to double check. If you're not sure how to get to the answer, you can watch our screencast on genetics and inheritance. There I explain in detail how to construct Punnett squares for questions like this. So catch up on that if you're not sure how to do this. The correct answer here in this case is C, 50% big B small b, 50% small b small b. Question 12 is based on the following text. Many years ago, beavers were introduced to a region of California that they had not previously inhabited. 40 years later, the beaver population had grown so much that a cluster of aspen trees used by the beavers for food and building materials inside the national forest became endangered. The beavers were also interfering with the water system. Looking back, how would biologists most likely evaluate the impact of the introduction of the beaver to the ecosystem? A, an important tool for controlling the aspen population. B, a disruption of the forest ecosystem. C, a model program for other animals. Or D, having no significant effect on the forest ecosystem. Have a think about that. You can pause the video. The answer will come in a moment. So the correct answer here is answer B, disruption of the forest ecosystem. Now the very important point that we are told about here is directly at the start. Beavers were introduced to a region of California that they had not previously inhabited, which means beavers usually or never lived in that area. So in this case, they are a so-called invasive species. It's a species that does not really belong into that environment, into that ecosystem. And although it might be nice to have beavers around, in this case, it does more harm than good. Especially because, as we learn later on, that the aspen trees were mainly affected by the introduction of the beaver to the point that they became endangered in the park. which means we have a disruption of the forest ecosystem, because for sure if trees are gone, then many other organisms that are tree dwelling in the ecosystem will be affected as well. All right, next question. Oh no, actually, okay, we are finished here with part 1 of this practice test. I hope I could help you in the preparation for your GED exam. Again, if you had trouble following some of the questions, understanding my explanations, try to look up a related screencast in our library. There are screencasts on many different key topics, key content areas that you should know about for the GED test. So check out these if you need more help focused on a specific topic. Otherwise, if the screencast was helpful for you, again, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. It will allow us to reach more people who are looking for support to prepare for their GED. This was GED Live at PALS, GED Science Practice Test 3, Part 1. I hope to see you in Part 2. Until then, have a good day.